welcome to the Golden Flower Podcast, a sanctuary for your creative soul. I am writer, intuitive coach, and digital artist Angela Levesque.
And I am abstract painter, creative coach, and space holder for internal transformative processes. And did I say my name? No, Gemma Kaufman.
Well, today we are asking the question, where am I? And more specifically, is my dream still my dream? Now, we've done an episode before on how the creative journey assists us in answering the question of who am I? And today we're going to explore how the creative journey assists us in exploring where am I? Where am I in relationship to my own life trajectory? Where am I standing in a time of crisis? Can I locate where I am? This is a very relational question. Another thing, even we talk a lot about the micro and the macro. And so asking that big question about where I stand in terms of where I thought I would like to be at this point in my life, but also on a micro level, asking ourselves, like, where is my consciousness seated most of the time? Is it in my heart? Do I feel embodied? And so this question of where I am is really about relationship. It's about relativity. And we're going to talk about how the creative journey helps us locate where we're standing. Gemma, do you have anything that you want to add on this? Are you kind of ready to jump into the topic?
It's a very enticing question, and it's a classic coaching question. I'll say more about that when we get into it. It's the ultimate kind of self-inquiry. And like you say, to say, where am I, is this subtle distinction, and I'm looking forward to unpacking that. Yeah.
Well, awesome. We will get into that in just a moment after this short break. All right. Well, Gemma, I just spoke for a moment about this idea of relativity and relationship. Like, for example, if you called me and said, Angela, I don't know where I am, the first thing I would do is ask you to look around you. Like, what are the landmarks? What do you see that what do you see that can help you navigate where you're at this moment? And like you said, it's a subtly different question than who I am. And it provides us with, I think, important but different information. So I'm going to let you start off talking about, especially when we dive into that question, is my dream still my dream? I'm going to let you explore that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Where am I? Is my dream still my dream? Like, that would be a perfect frame to do a one-to-one or a group coach session. And what comes to mind is times where I've been coached with just that one question, like kind of, go in with that inquiry. Like, the coach would ask me, and where are you now? And something will come forth. And it might start, like you say, with this kind of like, oh, I'm sitting on this chair. I'm noticing this in my physical environment. And you keep going. And then at some point it would switch to something internal. I'm feeling this kind of emotion, and I'm having this memory. And it's a specific type of coaching journey, just to stick with that question, and where are you now? Where are you now? So you're constantly locating yourself in those different layers, just like the onion, going deeper and deeper and deeper. It's so powerful. I'm tempted, because I'd love to do a live demonstration of this, but I also know that I wouldn't do it in this public space, because it's such a fast track to going to such deep places that we cannot possibly predict or anticipate, that is quite vulnerable. It's so powerful. Like all things that are very powerful, they're also very vulnerable. And yeah, straight away, when I think about how I use my kind of creative journey as a way of locating myself, I instantly think not so much about the where am I, what town am I living, who am I with, and what am I doing, and much more about the what am I feeling, what am I thinking, what do I know, and what am I believing. Like that's for me much more of uh, a way of locating where I am. And this is why I love the creative journey so much, because I feel like it is this invitation to grounded truth, personal truth. The what am I thinking, what am I believing? And it's when you get to that kind of ground that you can really, it's huge for me. Whenever I pick up a paintbrush, I feel like the where am I now is like a whisper that I have between me and the blank canvas. I don't consciously like whisper it to myself, but I know it's something that's there in the background because of the way that I lean on painting as this kind of self-mapping. I'll say a little bit more about this when we get into the episode, but I'm aware that not everyone would approach the question the same way. Like I'm curious how you've maybe had a tango with the where am I, and how that's shown up for you.
Well, I've spoken before about moving back from Japan and being in that mini midlife crisis and being able to locate myself, even just being able to say to myself, you're in a liminal space. You're in a space of uncertainty. And even just being able to understand that that's where I stood was incredibly helpful, because I moved back, and I've talked about, we actually relocated to a totally different place, because once I understood, okay, I'm in a liminal place, but also I asked myself that question, where am I? Like, where am I standing? And I realized that where we were, and I mean this in a very literal sense, although it obviously is metaphorical as well, but it just wasn't the right place for us anymore. And so it wasn't a matter of like, who am I? Although that was part of my kind of journey through that liminal space, was that asking that question, but exploring like, where am I standing right now? And is this where I want to be? Was a really, really profound thing. And it caused us to move, and now we're in a different place and we love it so much. And it makes so much more sense. So I think that those two questions, who am I and where am I, are like two of the most important things that you can contemplate if you're in a time, what I call like a choice point. So those moments where it's kind of like you're at the crossroads and you're like, I could go here. Sometimes I could go backwards, which is for myself incredibly difficult and uncomfortable. Or, do I want to go left or do I want to go right? But in order to answer that question, when you're at a choice point, first locating like, here I am, this is where I stand. Because we've heard that quote, and I don't know exactly, but like, you can't plan, where you're like, if you have no idea where you're going, you're not going to get there, right? But in order to understand where you're going, you need to understand where you're located in that moment, and how is that a reflection of where you've been, and is it in alignment with where you want to go? And have you gotten off course? Is there a course correction that's required? And none of that information is available, I think, unless you really locate where you are in the moment.
Mm. Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I mean, the first thing is I'm struck again by it's a very confrontational place to be, you're describing liminal space or place. I'm thinking of that means a sense of not being here or there. And then that can be a really hard place to confront yourself with difficult questions of trying to locate. I know that for me, I really struggled with this. I avoided these kind of questions because I felt they were too difficult to answer. Which kind of draws my attention to, like, you're kind of touching on, I feel like there's different ways we can ask, like self-inquiry can have a different emphasis, a different quality of attention, because in some ways we're asking ourselves, well, one way we can, and probably why I avoided it for so long, is a bit like, am I where I'm supposed to be? That subtle should. have I met my expectations of myself at this time? The answer is almost always no. So that kind of inquiry we shy away from. But there's a softer way of just being like, you know, I feel like the reframe is a bit more like, how am I doing with what is already present for me? You know, like on every level, like how am I doing with my environment? How am I doing with my relationships? But most importantly, like it's almost like how am I doing in relation to myself? I mean, I guess I'm just kind of talking in a long-winded way, in a way of I just want to say that I really admire the courage that it takes to get to that confrontational place, which is an edge of growth, especially when we're not really feeling up to it, because a lot of things are unstable. And I know for me, it wasn't really until I found what I describe as like the safety and containment of the creative process that I found that I could more softly ask these questions. Like I say, what am I feeling? What am I believing? Like there's an invitation into self-ownership. I mean, it kind of links to the workshop we did, right? Which was it was making that point of how much we need to find a way to trust ourselves. You know, our intuition is really like how much we trust ourselves in the moment, and that deep trust. Often what's happening when we're in that place, that choice point, that confrontational place, is we're not so sure about something. We've lost a little bit that relationship with ourselves, that flow of trust. Maybe it was never there. Maybe it's not flowing as it used to. You know, there's something going on there. So the question is how to kind of bring that back in, how to build that bridge. For me, that's always been to go to intuitive creative exercise. That's how I've reinstated or discovered that place of trust and self connection.
Well, I actually want to talk, you had mentioned a workshop, and so people might listen to this and have no idea what you're talking about. But I was going to mention the workshop that we had just done on developing intuition for our creative journey. And you had us do these series of mark makings to see if there was a message for us that could help us translate what's going on inside of us. And so I actually had a really profound experience from that. And the way that you talked about it was being able to sort of locate where you are. And that was kind of the impetus for this conversation about asking ourselves, where am I? And I realized that it was really cool. Like I had a mountain, and then I had a bunch of mountains that were in the distance. And of course, as I'm saying this, it's a bunch of scribbles, but this is the way that I in the moment interpreted it, right? And so I saw kind of where I had been, and then I saw that I'm embarking on this new way of being. And that was really, really powerful to have that show up again, but also it really helped me locate and get very clear on where I am, where I'm standing. And then that next question of, is my dream still my dream? So what does this new mountain look like? Am I carrying old stuff and trying to pack it with me on this new adventure up this new mountain? I'm really, really going into this metaphor, but you know what I mean? Like it's, and then asking, okay, so what is it that I'm moving towards? And these are all conversations about locating ourselves. And then assisting us in the planning. The next phase is like maybe the goal setting, the planning, okay, so now that I've located where I am, I've thought about again where I want to go. Now, how do I get there? Can I say one more thing about that you were talking about the courage? Being in a place where I don't understand where I am is so much more uncomfortable than diving into that like reflection and like figuring it out and being, like it's just way more unbearable to be somewhere where I don't know where I am than to go into those hard questions. Does that make sense?
You know, what comes to mind is a very strong example of, not the beginning of my creative journey, because it was going on years before I began the painting journey, but this was, I talk about the integration and the assimilation that happened. And when I started to realize that my creative expression and everyone's creative expression is directly connected with a transformation of consciousness. Most of the time, we're in a place where we are kind of just with a bit of contraction and a bit of a feeling like whatever we have, we need to kind of control it. And, it's just that we manage ourselves. And the tip is like to tip into a place above the line is to open into a space of curiosity where we can't say for sure what's happening. We acknowledge that things are out of our control, and it's kind of difficult to shift into that place of letting go-ness and openness and curiosity, because the density of feeling the closeness, because the more overwhelmed we tend to feel, or the more the sense of like whether it's just dissatisfaction or panic, all of that just kind of compounds the density, which makes it even harder, which is why I feel like things like picking up the paintbrush or drawing, or just getting a flavor of it in that mark making exercise, is just like releasing a little bit of a valve in the moment. And I always say that like painting for me is just like a moment to get everything out. But I found out, because another question that I love in coaching is not just the where am I now, or where are you now if I was coaching someone. It's also that what else? You say something, it's like, and what else? And again, it's like, okay, all this stuff's going on that I'm aware of. I know that this is a problem and this is a problem, and I'm stuck here and I don't know what to do about this. But then you get to the and what else? And that's the revelation point. It's just like, and this part of me is, I already know that I've been seeking out teachers and I'm learning about these things in this different way. And I notice that I'm starting to recognize patterns within myself, and all this other, all that what else-ness comes forward. And suddenly that picture becomes a bit more balanced, because it's so easy for the contraction to dominate the picture. And that's when we fall below the line and we tend to feel not very powerful and not very capable. Again, that compound. So when things open up, and this is why to me creative exercise is such an important part of self-inquiry and part of coaching, part of the transformation journey, is because it creates space, and the space for the other elements that are hidden. And what are they? Kind of what you were saying, like they are also elements which reflect things that help us locate. So if I'm out of touch with what I'm feeling because I'm just too scared to feel that feeling, that I can find safety in the creative flow. I can find safety in the fact that things are moving quickly. So maybe it's easier for me to witness anger within myself in the creative state than it is just to be on my own feeling that, or whatever. If we want to get more subtle into the subtle realms, and I think maybe I am talking about a kind of, maybe it's more to do with a more feminine type of consciousness, which I kind of gravitate towards, which is like the whisperings of like, what is it that I'm believing? What is it that I'm knowing? And maybe I'm not making space to really feel into that, which means I'm not really taking space to own myself at this time. I'm not seeing myself as I am. I'm not giving myself the attention to know who I am in this moment, and therefore I can't know where I am in this moment in relation to where I want to be.
Well, I do. You spoke about contraction, and I also spoke about this idea of the macro and the micro, right? So understanding where we are in relationship to larger things like where am I in my community, or even larger than that, where am I in my life trajectory? But then on the micro, understanding like where your consciousness is seated. And when you're talking about that contraction, often if you ask people like where they feel anxiety, worry, all of that, it's usually a tension that exists somewhere between like their solar plexus and their sacral chakra, which is the area right between your navel and your rib cage. Like people often, when you say like, can you pinpoint where that anxiety is? It's seated right there, like a knot, right? And this idea of creating space, and locating like where do I feel that contraction? Like locating that in your body. And then, like you said, having these tools in order to kind of dislodge. And the dislodging part can be uncomfortable. Like it's not like I always tell people, like when you're working through stuff, it usually you have like a revival of it. It comes back up for a while on its way out, right? Because it's been so contracted and pushed down and often not acknowledged. And then soon as you start to acknowledge it, it starts to break up, and it starts to kind of, like I said, there it kind of you have a revisitation of all of that stuff on its way out. But having that, like the mark making, having painting, having journaling, any form of expression in order to give acknowledgement, but to give space to that stuff so it doesn't have to like exist so contracted and tight in the body is incredibly important for that to be able to be moved up and out. So I feel like that's kind of where you're going, but maybe
Yeah, that was a really lovely, clear reflection of, yeah, what I'm saying is like this whole thing about like, is my dream still my dream? Like, and for creatives, for myself and clients that I've worked with, it can be a little bit tricky because we kind of, it takes such a kind of determination in a way, like to kind of set your sights on, you know, the creative life and to your artistic existence. And, you know, for me in the beginning, I just didn't really, I don't think I've ever kind of really known when I would arrive at any kind of destination on this journey or this dream. So, you know, I think part of like there's self-protective parts of me, even in this conversation, being like, you know, oh, you're going to start asking yourself whether you still want to be a painter, whatever that means, or you still want to be doing these things, whatever that means. There's like a little bit of a reflex in there. It's just like, you know, things were put in motion. You were put on a trajectory. You sacrificed certain things. You ignored certain things. You know, whatever, and you went after in a certain way, and it's just like, huh. Where am I now with all of that? Is it still as important? Am I prepared to do the same thing moving forward? Especially when it comes to like our creative identities. And if it was a kind of a hard-won battle to get on that path in the first place, I think there's understandably a little bit of like guarding of it. You know, this is, again, I think we started the episode being like, this is a great coach conversation. It's such a great one to pull apart. It's kind of sticky.
it's very sticky, but and it's difficult work, but I think it's when we think about course correction, right? Like we can't make a course correction if we don't ask ourselves, if we don't locate where we are every once in a while, because it's so often like, isn't that what happens? All of a sudden you're, you know, it's been 5 years and you're like, how did I get here? I kind of embarked on this with this idea of where I wanted to be. And now I haven't really checked in with myself for a long time. And do I need to course correct? But I also want to, you said something about it being a state of being, and I think that that's the most important thing. It's not just about, okay, I wanted to be a writer. Am I a writer? It's about, what does writing provide for you? And
Mm.
if you, as our life shifts and we have kids and we do all of that, there's qualities that writing brought out, that painting brought out for you, that do you still have the opportunity for that expression in your life in other ways? And it could be through playing with your little girl. You know, you're going to do an art class with her after. Like, there's still pieces, because that's where we get lost. It's when we totally have gotten so far off track that those qualities, that state of being that we know is in resonance with us, when that is further and further away from where we stand. And so it's not just about, oh, I'm a writer. Am I writing? Am I, following that life trajectory of being a writer? It's about what's encompassed in all of that. And is there still opportunity? Do you still exist in that state of being, in whatever way that looks like, more often than not, I guess.
Yeah, you nailed it. I really like what you said. You said, what is it bringing me? The thing that I was so sure that was my dream, that I needed, that I went off, that I pursued, that I put myself on track for, being the musician, being the writer, being the painter, whatever. It's necessary. It's part of it. It's like the check-in point is like, what is it bringing me now? Because like you say, the quality that it brings to our lives can show up in other ways, which allows us to readjust course. And that's part of being the creator, the open, curious creator, because we need to be making these adjustments. I tell you, it shows up quite a lot when, I can think of people that I've worked with that are just very, very fixated on being something, very, very identified with it. But it's almost like, because there's so much to do with the creative life, like, you struggle a lot, and of course you can't expect things to get the results for a long time. So you can be in a place where you're not really having many of your needs met, and you're also potentially missing out on other things that we kind of want at different stages of our life, like family life, or moving out of communities that no longer serve us, or all this kind of thing. So yeah, I feel like that's a really nice way to go from the where am I, is my dream still my dream? And again, staying with that soft inquiry, which is the one that will give us the fruit, the juicier answers, is like, this thing, what is it bringing me? Like, can I feel into that? And again, it's that level of truth telling within ourselves, to be in alignment with that level of integrity takes practice as well. Like, it's not the way that we're wired, in a way, just makes self-inquiry not as straightforward. And this is why I think we're both coming from the place of like, do it in held space, do it with yourself with some kind of practice, and or all of the above. Bring in the creative exercise as a way of like freeing yourself from trying to wriggle out or escape the too directness of questions, because you talked about the spaciousness, and you just recently had that experience of like, you had like a vision unlocked for you, which potentially gave you more than if you just, being a writer in your more comfortable modality, if you'd just been like, right, Angela, where am I? Tell it, you know what I mean? You got something else.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop, and we're going to talk a little bit about a creative challenge that'll help us explore the idea, is my dream still my dream? And I want to share a little bit about my exploration with some of the previous creative challenges that we've done very briefly, and how they help us do exactly what Gemma was just saying. Like it's helped me enter, it's given me an entry point into my inner landscape that I wouldn't have otherwise had. So we'll do that. We'll talk about that and more when we get back. All right, Gemma, this week's creative challenge is a really, really simple one. We're just journal on this idea of, is my dream still my dream? And just allow yourself, I actually, in my mind, and I would like your thoughts on this. In my mind, it would be a timed entry. Like maybe, like you set a 5-minute timer and you just write. And maybe that takes a little bit of reflection. Maybe you want to start with the question, like, what was my dream? And get clear on that. And then ask yourself, is my dream still my dream? But yeah, this is something that I've been playing with for a while, and I think it's a really valuable inner exploration, a really valuable thing to journal on. What do you think?
I love it. And I think we're thinking like morning page style, like don't take your pen off that paper when it goes down, set the timer. And so that means that you write, I don't know what to write when we don't know what to write. Like we just keep going. 5 minutes. Yeah, I think 5 minutes. And like you say, like if you want to rephrase the question, then you're rephrasing the question as part of those 5 minutes, as part of the journal entry. And if you feel resistance, normal. It's normal.
Yeah, I just really briefly wanted, this was a few episodes ago, we talked about a creative challenge where the cafe, where you
Mm,
go and you write. It was about creating a whole new world, like in the way that you would like, and working with your vision and that sort of thing. And I never follow the rules. I'm so intuitively led, and so that if I'm in it and I feel like a resonance and I feel like I should go this direction with it, I just do it. Because when I'm doing readings for people, soon as I start to put in my critical mind and be like, oh, is that really what I see? Is that really, it puts me in a totally different space. So I feel like if I feel led, I just lean into it. And so I was doing the cafe challenge, and I started thinking about a previous challenge before that, about the amplification. And so I'm writing this cafe, and I see this cafe and this cat, and I see this whole thing. And then I start all of a sudden having all these really uncomfortable feelings about things. And I just start writing about it. I just lean into it, but I leaned into it not from I'm writing a journal perspective. I wrote it from a story perspective. So I start writing this cafe, and then there's characters, and the person at the cafe who's me, who's having all these uncomfortable feelings, that's being like it's that amplification. I leaned into it, and I wrote about those feelings from like a like a like a fictional story. And it was so valuable to me, because not only was I writing things that then I could go and look at some of like the symbolism and that sort of thing, it really helped me create space. Like I said, like I had all of these uncomfortable feelings, and instead of just writing it out in a journal format, I wrote it in a story, and that allowed me to get much deeper into the emotions and much deeper into like that relationship between me and the other characters, and how all that came together. So it was incredibly powerful. It was a
I
mix.
love it. Oh, sorry.
It was a mix of two different challenges, but I leaned into it, and it created so much space.
Mm, mm. It's really coming across, and I love that you like all those challenges, essentially they're starting points. And I feel like what you're sharing there is like, who would have thought that the invitation of intuitive creative exercise, which people you kind of think of like as that being like imaginative and ungrounded, the invitation to the creative intuitive realm is also to grounded truth about oneself. Like you don't know, you see what I'm saying? It's just like, oh, when I fly off into these places, I actually come home to myself. When I allow myself to go on this tangent, and when I amplify it and blow it up and all these things that I don't really associate with that groundedness, then I come home to myself. And then that ownership that comes, there's a fulfillment that comes with that you can't get anywhere else. You know, that feeling when you're just like, yeah, you read something that you've written, you've got your drawing in front of you, your painting in front of you, whatever it is, it's just like, yeah, now I know. Now I know. It's such a, even if you don't know the full story, you know something, it's come home, it's come home, and there's a like, I can do something with this. It's that point of power back again, that tipping you again into that place of, that's what makes it the journey, I guess.
Well, and that's, the whole point of these creative challenges is like to provide an entry point into those types of revelations and exploration. So fantastic. Well, that's if you want to find out more about Gemma, you can go to GemmaKaufman.com. She has fantastic, I have one in my living room. She has fantastic prints up on Etsy at etsy.com. It's just look, Gemma Kaufman art is I think searchable.
It's in the link.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about myself, you can go to chaosandlight.com and find us on Instagram at Golden Flower Podcast, as well as at YouTube at The Golden Flower, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's the episode for today. Follow the aliveness, nurture that spark, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.